On today's Palace of Pistons podcast, we are back and we have so much to talk about. Could the Pistons be one of the dark horse teams? Talking to the Phoenix Suns about Kevin Durant. We've also got some names that Detroit is interested in free agency. We're going to talk about those guys and their fit with the team, as well as some other trade speculation for Detroit heading into what should be a fantastic offseason of moves all across the NBA. A really good show. We're so glad to be back. Thanks, guys, for tuning in and enjoy the show.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another exciting night of NBA basketball.
The Pistons are digging in. They got the depth. They got the big men. They got the better basketball team. No doubt about it.
Pistons need a three, and they have just under 3 seconds to do it. Here's Chauncey Billups. Here it is. He's got it. He's got it. Chauncey Billups hits the three. Overtime. Amazing.
Out of bounds. Detroit basketball.
Pistons fans, welcome back to the Palace of Pistons Podcast, part of the Believe Network. I'm your host, Mike Anguilano, joining you after how long have we been gone? A month?
It's been about a month. I think it's over a month, technically.
Oh, over a month and probably even longer for me. So we're very happy to be back. We decided to bring back the pod because some Pistons news is happening. I'm joined by my two co-hosts, Aaron Johnson and Jasper Apollonia. Fellas, how are we doing after 6, 10, 8 weeks off? I have no idea. When is the last podcast that got
think
published?
it's been like 5 weeks, technically. I think the last one was right like the first week of May. So we're back. It was a nice break, maybe a little bit longer than I had anticipated. I was like, oh, maybe we'll just take a break for a few weeks, whatever. We'll come back. And it just kind of kept on going. But we're back now. And look, there's a lot to talk about since we've been on a little bit of a hiatus. There's a lot to talk about with the Pistons offseason. We keep hearing that the NBA offseason is really going to start heating up here within the next week or so before the draft. So it should be a really entertaining offseason. And I think the Pistons could be one of those teams that's making a lot of moves and really fortifying themselves after the season that they just had.
Look, I think we should stop lying to the fans out there. Let's be honest, guys. The Pistons got sent to Cancun, and we had to go as well. So we've just been on the beach the last few weeks, hanging out in the sun, drinking piña coladas. I was taught how to say it properly by one of the locals there. We became very, very ingrained in their customs and such. So if you're noticing a certain glow about us, if you're saying, wow, these guys look like they're a lot better at golf now, that's why. We have just been partying it up nonstop. And I think we owe our fans a little bit of honesty in that regard. But we are very happy to be back. The Pistons are still off for the rest of the offseason. But guess what? The NBA news does not slow down, even when there's only 2 teams left in the finals. Which, by the way, guys, what the hell is going on in this Pacers OKC series? I had OKC in 5.
Yeah, I
No
thought it was
question.
going to be a sweep, maybe a gentleman's sweep. I think, look, at the end of the day, when we look back, Oklahoma City right now, they were a regular season wagon, but man, if this team does end up winning the finals, if they end up coming back and beating Indiana, I'm gonna have some thoughts on them that, and not to say, that I mean, they are in the NBA finals and their core is incredibly young and they have a ton of talent. They have the MVP, they have a ton of other young talented players. They have another all-star on the team. But man, if this is the best team in the NBA right now, it just felt like this year was very gettable for another team or two to go on a run. And that's why you're seeing Indiana in the Eastern Conference and a weak Eastern Conference. But even out in the West, like I'm feeling a little bit surprised watching this finals that OKC is the team to come out of the Western Conference.
Yeah, I mean, shoot, they have not looked great in this finals, period. They just haven't. And it's also interesting too, because when I think about this Pacers team, we always talk about the 2004 Pistons squad as being a real unicorn title team in the NBA. They had maybe maybe two top 15 players in the league. And to see Indiana doing kind of now putting themselves in a similar position to win a title. Tyrese Halliburton, obviously an all-star, all-NBA type player, but I don't think anybody realistically had him in their top 10 going into these playoffs. So it's really interesting to see a team like Indiana kind of follow that similar formula and take themselves right now to 2 wins away from winning an NBA title.
Guys, do you remember when we called the Pacers opening loss a bad loss for the Pistons because it was a winnable game?
It
Oh,
still is. It still is a bad loss to me. God, I remember how terrible the defense looked in that game. But I think
awful.
that's also instructive of like what the NBA regular season showed us because
Yeah.
both those teams looked horrible in the first game. Honestly, for the first month of the season. And towards the end of it, now you're looking at it and Indiana on the verge of winning a title. And frankly, after what we've seen transpire in these playoffs, it's hard not to believe that the Pistons had a few things gone a little differently in that Knicks series. I don't know, guys. I don't know if they
Could be.
I never ever thought they were beating Indiana in the playoffs. I did not want Indiana at all. But an Eastern Conference title run,
It's
it
closer
was in
than
the
we thought.
cards.
It's
It
closer than we would have thought at the beginning of the season. I mean, what the Pacers are doing, they just have that vibe about them. And I was talking about this with somebody who covers the Cavs and thinks, well, the Cavs just have to run it back again, which may be true. But there's something about Indiana which they just like make you do dumb things. The Thunder had 19 turnovers. SGA had more turnovers yesterday than he had in any game since like December. They just get under your skin and they find ways to make you do dumb things and they win basketball games. It's just that's not something that comes up on a stat sheet. It's not something that NBA or that cleaning the glass tracks. It's just like that's just a attitude and good coaching and just personnel. And the Pistons are obviously not far from that. I mean, it seems like you said, Jasper, very instructive of the regular season, but it seems also instructive of the Pistons are not far away. They have some of these things that Indiana has. I mean, they kind of showed it against the Knicks of just a won't go away type of mentality. Um, Maybe this is a good segue to talk about the state of the East. But before we talk about that, I want to thank our sponsor for this week, and that is the Palace of Pistons Substack, which is technically a sponsor of this show because it is our Substack. It's where we post all of our content. I know it's been a little light on content lately, and I've missed a couple weekly drives while, the playoffs have unfolded and now the finals have unfolded, but we're planning on bringing back the weekly drive every Monday. I'm sure Aaron is planning on something coming on Wednesday, and you'll get the podcast coming on Friday as usual. So we're approaching the return of our standard content calendar, and we hope that you will join us on Substack if you have not yet. If you have, we thank you very much for being a loyal listener, a loyal follower. But we will be getting back to our regularly scheduled content starting on probably with this podcast. This is like our foot back into the water. So if you have not subscribed, it's in the link to our or rather the link is in our show notes. It's on YouTube in the description. If you get your podcast there or wherever you get your podcast, it'll be in the show notes. It's the Palace Pistons Substack. So please give us a follow if you haven't. It takes a couple seconds. We really appreciate it. And that way we can deliver all this awesome content directly to you right into your inbox. No need to find it. Aaron, do you want to add anything real fast? I was a little bit rusty in my,
Oh,
script.
oh, yeah. Look, the people are going to have to understand. There might be some rust getting back into it. This is like, we're coming off of, a month-long injury. We just got back on the court, so there might be some rust here or there, but we're going to get it going. And by the end of the show, we're going to be hot. It's going to be hot. Shots are going to be falling, and people are going to be happy. They're going to listen to a good show. So I think without further ado, we gotta get into the topics for today.
Yes, we can get into it. We don't really have an exact script, but I think with us talk about the East, let's just talk about the East, start things off, and that'll lead us into some of the free agency talk and signings and trade talk, which trade talk is dominating the cycle. The draft is like totally second, maybe even third after the finals itself. But the state of the East, we kind of talked about it a little bit already. This is a pretty weakened Eastern Conference. The Boston Celtics are going to be weaker. They have to trade away somebody of consequence, and Jason Tatum tore his Achilles. The Knicks just fired Tom Thibodeau. No news on what they're going to do with Karl Anthony Towns, and they also have a bit of a crunch within their roster.
I mean,
Uh,
Mike, the Knicks are like a guy who walks into a club and walks up to every girl and asks if he can kiss them.
and it's
Like
not
that's
working.
and it's not, yeah, well, it's working about as well as it does for those kind of
That's
guys.
exactly right.
But like
Yes.
that's what they're doing right now. Nobody wants to talk to them. So
No.
yeah, that's a pretty rough look.
The
I'm
the
still
the
waiting
ca-
for the Knicks reached out to the Detroit Pistons to interview JB Bickerstaff and were declined.
Dude,
I
the
think
best thing, the most long-lasting thing the Knicks are going to get from this playoff run are the zesty cat memes. That's about it.
Yeah, that's probably about it. I was talking to somebody because the Cavs are also one of those teams that are weakened after flaming out in the second round again. Johnny Bryant is an assistant on Kenny Atkinson's staff. He did coach the Knicks before this. I think, what after they get rejected by everybody else, the Knicks may end up going to Johnny Bryant as well. But, even so, the Cavs are weakened. The Knicks are weakened. The Sixers are just a constant cluster. The Pistons are right there. Indiana's going to be right there. Orlando may be right there again. Um, who knows what Miami does. The Bulls are in. They've the only team that has made the play in every year. So it's like you have this cluster of teams, but the top of the East is very much in flux. The Pistons were linked to Myles Turner. They were linked to Naz Reid. There's a lot of commotion about Kevin Durant being moved, which would be seismic depending on where he goes. And could the Pistons get in on any deals for bigger players like that? So I just kind of threw every single topic out at you. But how about if we start with some of the free agency talk or trade talk with Naz Reid, Myles Turner, guys like that? Is that something that the Pistons should they be going all in, pushing all of their chips in on a guy like that? Or should they just kind of be waiting around, seeing what the rest of the league does, and after all the dust, settles, do they then kind of swoop in and see what they can get?
I think it makes all the sense in the world for Detroit to be interested in these types of players. Myles Turner, Naz Reid, Santi Aldama, they're all floor spacing, stretch bigs. Obviously, Myles Turner is kind of in a different echelon, I'd say, compared to Reed and Aldama, just because if you bring in Myles Turner, there's questions of what happens to Jalen Duren then, and what is Jalen Duren's fit with this team. But whether it's Turner, whether it's Reed, whether it's Aldama, whether it's another player of that same ilk, I just think that is the clear cut upgrade that the Pistons have to make to their roster. They have to get someone that can go out there, play the five, that can spread the floor, that can play in pick and pop situations. I mean, I think Myles Turner is an absolutely great candidate. From everything that we've heard, it sounds like Indiana is dead set on doing what's necessary to keep him. But if Detroit is willing to and able to get into those discussions with him, I would be all for it. I think what he brings on both sides of the court, hell, we know from watching Indiana play Detroit 3, 4 times a year, what Myles Turner does, how much of a headache he was for Detroit every time they stepped on the court together. I love everything about the way that he plays, except for the fact that he doesn't necessarily score a ton in the paint, but what he can do from the outside is really, really valuable. And without getting too into the weeds on it, just because we're talking about it as a broader topic for of these guys that Detroit might be interested in, you think about, well, if Myles Turner can't really do a lot of scoring in the paint, how much does that hurt Detroit? I think it opens up things for Asar Thompson because we know how good Asar Thompson is at rolling to the basket, at finishing around the rim, playing in the cutter. I think there's a lot of opportunity there, so it feels like those two would be a really good fit. But really, just in general, I think the idea that the Pistons need to go out and get a meaningful stretch big on this roster, I think that it's a really good indication that we're seeing that. I think it's good when, us laymen can sit here and see and hear that the front office, that the organization is interested in the type of players that you would want them to be interested in. So this is encouraging. If it's me sitting here saying this, it's encouraging to see the Pistons interested in these types of guys because right up there on my to-do list for Detroit this offseason was add a floor spacing big. And to talk about Turner, Reid, Aldama, those are all guys that are going to get paid impactful money. So the Pistons don't just want to get a end of the roster guy that they could throw out there in situations. They want to get a real contributor that can play 20, 25, 30 minutes a game potentially and be worth a sizable contract. So I think these are all good names to be interested in, and I think I'd be okay with Detroit going after all three of them.
Yeah, I think regardless of whatever philosophical outlook you have on the future of the Pistons, whether you want them to take a big swing this offseason or if you want them to play it a little safer, there's no question whoever they bring in has to be a front court player that can space the floor. There's no question about it. And we saw it in that Knicks playoff series. Look, it kind of played out the way that we thought it would. Jalen Brunson went off. But really, at the end of the day, what decided that series was Karl Anthony Towns being able to hit outside shots in crucial situations with a high degree of difficulty. And that was something the Pistons simply did not have in that series. Karl Anthony Towns wasn't perfect, but he made the difference in my eyes in pushing the Knicks over the hump. Game 4 especially. I mean, he hit some absolutely ridiculous shots. The Pistons just need somebody who can do that for them. And while Tobias Harris has been fantastic, he was absolutely scintillating in that playoff run, no question about it. You're totally right, Aaron. They need somebody who can hit those shots, who can open up space for Sar Thompson inside, but they also need to be wary about what is the balance of this team. We saw how far their defense took them. Once Asar Thompson returned, even with Jaden Ivey going down, the Pistons were driven by such strong defensive effort and high level play on that end of the floor. That was a huge part for them. So I think that's something that also needs to enter into the equation. Like, even if you're somebody that doesn't want to take a big swing, and we're going to mention a big swing in a second here, even if you're going for those smaller guys, I think you need somebody that's going to fit in with your roster and is going to fit in with your locker room, philosophically speaking. I'm not sure Myles Turner, for me, is that kind of guy. I also just think, I mean, especially if the Pacers win the title, I just don't think he's going anywhere. I would have a really hard time seeing the Pacers let him go. But like somebody like Santi Aldama, I think absolutely could fit in. He's maybe not like a super sexy name, but if you watch the Memphis Grizzlies, he does a lot of things really well for them. He is somebody that can hit outside shots. He is willing to bang in the post as well. I've always really liked his game. I think Jake LaRavia is another guy off of Memphis who has been mentioned as a potential Pistons target. I don't feel as strongly about him. And then, of course, Naz Reid. And I think in regards to your questions around somebody like Myles Turner, who is really a pure center, I think Naz Reid definitely fits more into what the Pistons have right now in their front court. You wouldn't necessarily have to lose Tobias Harris in order to acquire him. And you could also have him work both as a power forward and a center. Aaron, we were discussing it before the show. He played basically every minute this year with another big on the floor, either in Julius Randle or in Rudy Gobert. And there's no reason to believe you couldn't do something similar to that in Detroit. I think the question mark there is not on the offensive side of the floor and how he fits in there. I think it's more on the defensive end of the floor. He really got exposed in the playoffs. And I think that's something that you have to keep in mind. Because again, like Tobias Harris being able to provide a backbone of interior defense and being able to switch out onto the perimeter on Karl Anthony Towns was, I mean, it's impossible to overstate how big of an impact he had on the series there. Karl Anthony Towns shot like 35% when he was guarded by Tobias Harris. I think that's something you have to maintain this offseason, regardless of who you're bringing into the roster or perhaps losing from the roster. You have to have that mentality continue to be the backbone of this team. And it's for the exact reasons that, like you said, Indiana is in this position. Because not only are they a really good offensive team, they've strengthened themselves over the course of the season defensively. That was their biggest question mark, and they've really come together on that end. You are not going to be a real title contender if you can't maintain your defense. So I think that's certainly something that the Pistons have to be aware of going into this offseason. Mike, you know, it's not like we're talking about the smaller guys here. There's also a bigger name that's been thrown around as well. Yeah.
Yeah,
Some
there's been a bigger
guy,
name.
some guy, he's made a couple all-star teams. I think he
A
scored
few.
like 30,000 points. Kevin Durant. You ever heard of
Yeah.
him?
Unfortunately, yes. 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 His 3 over LeBron will live on forever. Basically to win the title. Yeah, he's gonna be traded. I mean, this has been like the worst kept secret for like 4 months at this point. Ever since the Suns really got like Bradley Beal and started to flounder a bit, and then a lot. It's been a matter of, okay, well, they have to trade Kevin Durant. They're not going to get nearly like half back of what they
Mike,
gave up for him.
they've been ready to tank since they tried to become contenders. Like the second they made that
Right.
trade, it's just been like, all right, now what are you tanking?
And then you have Matt Ishbia being like, no, 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 you need more of me. This is what I have determined is that I am not involved enough. I mean, for like hating Dan Gilbert's guts, he's doing an excellent Dan Gilbert impersonation of like, I just want to be involved in the team and make giant decisions. So the Suns are trading Kevin Durant. It's a matter of not if, it's a matter of when, and it's a matter of to who, and the package of what it's going to look like. Zach Lowe went on his new podcast as part of the Ringer and had mentioned a trade. I don't remember. It was Isaiah Stewart, Tobias Harris, Ivy, and maybe a first for Kevin Durant. That wasn't sourced or anything, and we don't have obviously any source like that. I was just throwing it out there as a team that could go for it because, like we said, the East is weak. Kevin Durant is an instant floor raiser to the nth power. Solves an immediate need next to Cade, and you're giving up a guy in Ivy that you really don't know what the end product is. You're giving up a guy in Stewart who has some utility on this team, but it's Kevin Durant. So you just kind of live with the losses and you figure it out with a future Hall of Famer. Do you guys have any opinion on going after a guy like KD? Is that a name that you feel like makes sense in giving up, I mean, really mortgaging the future for, or is this a let's not ruin what we have, go after smaller moves type of deal? Because he does have baggage with him, and that's just a thing at this point. He's older, he's been more injured, that has to be factored in. What's your opinion on going after a guy like Kevin Durant?
I don't think the Pistons are in a position to sit there and say we're not interested in Kevin Durant. I think for all the talk of trading for Kevin Durant would be a short-sighted move by the Pistons considering what they'd have to give up. I think it would be short-sighted for Detroit to not consider trading some of their young pieces for Kevin Durant because you're talking about adding what is still a top 10 player in the league to a team with Cade Cunningham. And the price for Kevin Durant will never be lower than it is now. He is going to be, what, 38, 37? He's going to be 37
Correct.
in a few
He's
months.
37.
And last year he averaged 27 points, 6 rebounds, and 4 assists on 53% shooting from the field and 43% shooting from the three-point line. He has made the All-Star team in the last 2 years. He only missed it. No, he's made it. He's made it every year outside of like 2019-20 and then the beginning of his career the first 2 seasons. He is an absolute star, star, star. And the price for him now, that package that Zach Lowe threw out, I had a similar package of Isaiah Stewart, Tobias Harris, Ron Holland, and the 2026 first for Kevin Durant. I understand that is a lot of valuable pieces from Detroit. We've talked about it all year long, how important, how impactful Tobias Harris was for the Pistons. And he was absolutely spectacular this year. We know the impact that Isaiah Stewart has on this team from the defense. He is one of the best defenders in the league. He is one of the best defending bigs in the league. We know Ron Holland has some very intriguing qualities. He had some really strong moments this year. And we know that first round picks, when you don't have them and you can't make moves with them, it's challenging when you're trying to improve the roster. But now that Detroit has their first to trade again, and they're coming off a playoff performance where we're sitting here saying there was a pathway to getting to the Eastern Conference Finals with this group. What if you added Kevin Durant, a 14, 15-time All-Star, to that group? I'm not saying that the Pistons have to do it. I think it would be crazy not to look into it. I also think at the end of the day, you might be sitting here as a Pistons fan saying, you'd really give up Stewart, Ivy, Ron Holland, you give up Tobias Harris, you'd move another first. I'm telling you right now that there is a team, a Houston Rockets, a New York Knicks, or whoever that will do whatever it takes to get a Kevin Durant, despite him being 37. He is still one of the absolute best players in the league, and he would be an absolute. Kevin Durant's a perfect fit anywhere. He's Kevin freaking
Right.
Durant. So, as
Well,
much as like you have to weigh the cost benefits, I think you'd be crazy not to look into taking on Kevin Durant.
well, the reason that I asked, like, do you want to do that is because I think there are Pistons fans who would scoff at the idea of breaking up some of the vibey, you know, heart and soul type of guys of the team, giving up on a Jaden Ivey, moving on from an Isaiah Stewart, who the media has called the heart and soul of the team. I think there are Pistons fans that would not like that idea.
There definitely are.
There definitely are. If we threw James Wiseman in there, they'd probably be like, no, of course not. You cannot give up James Wiseman. Are you crazy? Jasper, what are your thoughts on going after Kevin Durant?
Yeah, I think this is one of those things, and you're absolutely right. I already know we are going to have people in our comments saying you're stupid, you're crazy for wanting to trade for KD. And I can already tell you the reasons that they're going to say. He's going to be 37. He's under contract for $55 million over each year over the next 2 years.
50 mil, he's on an expiring, so you're going to have to pay him.
Well,
You
so
probably will
here's
pay him.
here's the thing is like he has 2 more years on his contract. He'll be 38 years old going into his age 39 year when he's off that contract. Um and they'll say look at Phoenix. Phoenix was an absolute disaster. How did things end in Brooklyn? Absolute disaster. This guy's a team killer. I completely disagree. Look, the thing in Brooklyn, not his fault at all. James Harden tore up his hamstring, and Kevin Durant's feet are an inch too long, and Kyrie Irving, he likes to do the most evil thing anybody in the world can do, and that's read. Um, Phoenix, I mean, do I really have to say what happened? They are still reeling from what happened 3 years ago in the playoffs when they were utterly pantsed by Luka Doncic and the Mavericks. That's a franchise. Forget a team. That's a franchise that is mentally scarred and had some of the worst roster building I've ever seen this year. I mean, they thought Tyus Jones was the guy who was going to lead their who's going to organize everything. Like, it's insanity. It just for me, like, I look at the circumstances around Kevin Durant and I say, yeah, this all looks really bad from the outside. But if you look a little deeper and you just look at the realities of what he is still doing offensively, Aaron, like you said, he is putting up historically efficient scoring numbers still at this age. He can play defense. I know he didn't play defense in Phoenix. There's a reason for that. Like that is another thing that I look at and go, if you give him the proper motivation, if you give him the proper coach, if you give him the proper team, I still think there is meat left on that bone for Kevin Durant. And lastly, Mike, like you just said, he is an expiring contract. This is not somebody that you have to hold on to for the next 4 years. This is also somebody that, with the way that the new CBA is going into effect and with the salary cap rising, could absolutely be a tradable piece as a big expiring salary that you could move on from if you really want to. to a team that's trying to tank and shed, if you're just trying to get rid of him, you can do it. I also think the price tag, when you look around the league and you look at like what a superstar price tag is, a true second banana, you're not going to find a lower price tag than you're going to get for Kevin Durant right now. There isn't anybody else out there that you're going to be able to get for cheap. And cheap is obviously relative, but sorry, if you're talking about like, I think Kevin O'Connor threw out on his podcast something like Tobias Harris, Stewart, Fontecchio, and 2 firsts. That is a totally reasonable trade package and one I would do because it also allows you to hold on to your young guys. It allows you to hold on to Durant. It allows you to hold on to Ivy and Asar and Ron Holland, which means that if you do need to pivot and you do need to reacquire first round picks, guess what? You have young, attractive talent after your playoff run this year that is eminently tradable. So, and let's also remember, like Durant and Ivy, you don't have to sign them to the extension this offseason.
No.
You can leave that up in the air. And if you want to make a move at the trade deadline, you can do that as well. You can move them on to another team and give them their bird rights to where they're restricted free agents. That's a riskless proposition for another squad. So the way I look at it, honestly, is that this is actually not that big of a swing if you make it for Kevin Durant. Yes, of course there is risk involved, but that is a risk you have to take if you want to take that next step. I also, after having said all that, completely understand the people that want to say, hey, let's just run it back. Let's see what we can get out of Jaden Ivey. Let's see if we can make some internal improvements with Jalen Duren, who looked much better post-January last year. Let's see if Cade has another gear he can reach, which I believe he does. Hey, let's see after Asar Thompson really like put his stamp on the playoffs. Let's see what kind of step he can take. Can he take the step that his brother took this year? What is Ron Holland? Is Ron Holland a rotation player, or is he also perhaps something more than that? So, like, I see both sides of the equation. Sure. I just think the thing that's important to note is that a potential Kevin Durant trade is not as big of a swing as people think it is. I think it's an even less of a swing than, say, Donovan Mitchell to Cleveland was. Really, I truly do, because I think that it allows you so much more flexibility in pivoting off of Kevin Durant,
right?
And reacquiring assets that you might lose in that trade. I think it actually leaves you in a pretty flexible position.
So I'm sorry, you go ahead, Aaron, first.
I was just gonna say, like, I'm totally fine with the Pistons running it back and making smaller moves. Like, if they do something where they end up with Naz Reid or Santi Aldama, and I don't know what's gonna happen with all three of Dennis Schroeder, Malik Beasley, and Tim Hardaway Jr. But if they bring back the top two and Schroeder and Beasley, and they figure out something with Fontecchio, like if they make those types of moves and say, well, we're going to add Jaden Ivey back to this team, and we're going to add Isaiah Stewart, who, if we had in the playoffs, I think there's a real case that you could make that the Pistons win that playoff series. We're going to add those two guys back. We're going to add in a floor spacing big, and let's say they make one other move, smaller type move for a depth move. I'm okay with that. It's just the proposition of this isn't trading for DeMar DeRozan. This isn't trading for Zach LaVine. You're talking about trading for Kevin Durant. Like we're not talking about trading for those fringe all-star type players. You're talking about trading for one of the greatest players of all time, who at age 37 next year is still going to be a top 10 player in the league. That's where it's like, if you want to run it back, you don't want to make any bigger moves, that's fine if you're talking about that like fringe all-star level. If you're saying you don't want to go after a top 10, a top 15 player in the league, I'm going to say you're crazy if you're not at least entertaining and seeing what the pricing is for something like that.
Right. If you're saying like I wouldn't go after Kevin Durant, but like let's trade for Lauri Markkanen, like that to me tells me the narratives have gotten to your head too much. You need to take a step back. Sometimes you do need to just look at the numbers. You know what I mean? Like, yeah,
that's like outsmarting yourself, right? It's like
Yeah.
you're doing too much mental gymnastics to not get Kevin Durant when he would fix every team in the league except for the Suns. Um, yeah,
I
for
mean, if
what
you
it's
can get
worth, you go ahead.
no, no, sorry, I was just gonna say, like, if you can get a guy who is still an all NBA player
Sure.
for less than 3 first round picks, I don't I don't care, dude. I don't
Right,
care. Do it. You do it, man. And
right.
that's not to say like you can't like I think we're all in agreement here. Like we're okay if they do make the big swing. We're okay if they just make a couple small roster improvements. I think the thing we'd all agree on is you can't have a repeat of Troy Weaver's last offseason in Detroit. You can't sit on your hands and do
No,
nothing. That's the
no.
one thing you can't do.
They're one of two teams with cap space, right? Between them and Brooklyn, it's like if you want to go get a Ty Jerome or whoever, they are one of the two teams that could do that and have that solved. Um, ESPN did report that the Rockets, Spurs, Heat, Wolves, and Knicks were teams in on Kevin Durant, or at least um, teams that have expressed interest in him. I don't think the Knicks are a reasonable team. I think the New York Post or somebody said that the Knicks are not going after Kevin Durant, but you know,
They also said there were some dark horse teams, though, and I
yes,
feel like Detroit could be one of those dark horse teams because there are people in the national media that are talking about it. And a lot of times in media, you hear
where there's
things
smoke,
and you don't necessarily report, oh, the Pistons are in on Kevin Durant, but you would talk about it. And so then you can come back and say, hey, maybe I had an inkling here that the Pistons were one of those dark horse teams in on Kevin Durant.
right?
Here's also one of those things when people talk about like the fit, like personality wise, because that's been a thing. Phoenix, Brooklyn, they both ended kind of ugly. I think it's also really important to note, like Cade is that like Kevin Durant is Cade's OG. Like that's his dude right there. Like he is a huge Cade fan. He's always advocated for Cade since Cade was in high school. Like there's a real relationship there. Um, and I think that's something you have to take into the equation as well. Like, sure, you could say, Kevin Durant, this, that, Twitter fingers, whatever. But I truly believe if he's around Cade Cunningham, that's a genuine difference. Like that's a way where you can go, I fully believe he will have more motivation to buy in if he's with Cade Cunningham than he would maybe on some of these other teams.
And that's a move that makes the Pistons a threat to win the conference to me. I mean, if you're assuming linear growth for everybody else, Ivy stays healthy, Cade takes that next, step, everybody moves up one rung on the ladder, basically. This is a team that, is going to compete for a conference championship, at least to get to the conference finals. He's that big of a razor. Any other free agency thoughts or
Just
like
knocking the rust
signings
off,
or
man. That's all.
I'm not gonna rust off is right.
We
Yeah,
all are. We
I
all are.
I haven't talked basketball, I don't know, probably since the Cavs got eliminated. So we're like almost a month at this point. Um, any other like free agency? I haven't seen any rumors of like other guys that are linked to Detroit. It seems like everybody's just kind of keeping their powder dry, at least for
Yeah,
the
man.
It's so
Pistons.
I
funny
mean,
we're talking like this, and the season is still going on.
It's still going,
We're
yeah.
in the season still, and we're still talking about, like free agency and the draft and trades and stuff. It's the NBA as a whole, sports in general. It's just like, what's next?
Yeah.
And I get it. For 28 fan bases, their teams are no longer playing, so they are thinking about what's next. My final thoughts on free agency for Detroit right now, and I would imagine you guys are going to be in agreement here. It feels like this is pretty much the thought process for everyone. But of Detroit's three main free agents, Dennis Schroeder, Malik Beasley, and Tim Hardaway Jr., if the Pistons can only work out the financials to keep two, which sounds like it could be in play, I think the pecking orders, Malik Beasley, Dennis Schroeder, are the two guys that need to come back. And then if you have to lose Tim Hardaway Jr., you lose Tim Hardaway Jr. You have Jaden Ivey coming back to theoretically fill his position anyway.
That's
I
correct.
can I
Yes.
can live without Schroeder as well. Like I mean, I would like to have him back at the right price point, but like I don't need to have Dennis Schroeder back.
If they do
Uh,
lose Schroeder, then I'd say they have to go get another point guard because you don't want to
Yeah, they
fall
have
into
to.
the same
no,
situation
you
they were in.
No. You
you
don't
you
want
don't
Marcus
necessarily.
Sasser.
But I also will say, like, it was pretty easy for the Pistons to find somebody to replace Shaden
Yeah.
Ivey this year. So I don't. Guards are easier. Like, it's easier to find a vet minimum, mid level kind of guy during the season than it is to find like a stretch four. Like, that's just hard. I think also, like, regardless of what they're doing this offseason, and you said in terms of free agency, Mike, free agency is dead in the NBA. The new CBA ensured that. There's just no free agency anymore. So it doesn't really matter that much. It's only going to be like mid low tier guys. Like Santi Aldama is one of the five most attractive free agents on the market this offseason. Like, that's not even an
Right.
exaggeration. So I think you have to take that into account as well.
Would you
I
rather
think
have would you rather have Trey Jones or Dennis Schroeder?
Dennis Schroeder.
Agree.
Okay. Would you
Yeah,
rather
just
have
because of like the shot making.
That and
sure.
Shooter's proven to be a playoff riser. Like I've seen him in a playoff setting, and he can play on the wall, he can play off the ball. He works.
Yeah,
Just know
yeah,
it's like on this team already, and I like it.
Would you
yeah.
rather have Spencer Dinwiddie or Dennis Schroeder?
Schroeder.
You're putting me in a bind right there because of Spencer Dinwiddie, but for the Pistons, got to say Schroeder. I just look. I would like the Pistons to bring back Dennis Schroeder. I think what he brought for them this year was great. He was in a great environment. He fit in right away. There was no like the vibes fell off with him, which maybe he hasn't been a perfect fit in every team that he's been on, but he was a great fit in Detroit, and I think what he provided them in the playoffs was great. So I would like to see Detroit bring him back as long as it makes sense financially.
All
I
right.
mean, sorry, I was gonna say, I think it's also important, like, whatever they do, they got to match up with Indiana,
Yeah. Well, I
right?
think that's kind of where we're getting at with the stretch big. I mean, look at these two teams. You have Chet Holmgren who can go out and do basically anything. Isaiah Hartenstein's not really a shooter, but he's kind of an instructive, like functional center that can do more than just be a center. And then you look at the Knicks with Karl Anthony Towns. I mean, they were also stretchy, although they played very well with Mitchell Mitchell
I
Robinson
wanted to
being a
ask.
more of a traditional center. You
We were
know,
talking about Kevin Durant, and one of my buddies sent a trade idea where Kevin Durant did go to New York, but the Pistons were the third team in it, and the Pistons took on Karl Anthony Towns. So we've talked about stretch bigs for Detroit. We've talked about guys that are kind of on that same
Mm.
pay scale like Myles Turner is going to be this offseason. Does Karl Anthony Towns, would you be interested in if you're the Pistons?
I think you kind of have some of the same issues the Knicks had this year if you bring on Towns. Like, that's the thing, I think. I think you just acquire some of those issues, especially defensively.
Yeah.
And like in the playoffs, like, I don't know. I mean, again, if we're talking about like matching up with Indiana in the playoffs, because they are the ones to beat going into next year. When you look at the East, sorry, Mike. Uh, I think
Softer than toilet
Carl.
paper out
I
here. I mean,
mean,
look.
yeah, I mean, Karl Anthony Towns, like, he did not have a great series against Indiana by any means. So I worry about that a little bit.
I think you have to listen. But I think it depends what you give up.
This is going to make people mad because this is a Pistons podcast.
Oh,
But Mike,
perfect.
I saw something, I think someone threw this out there, but something like Darius Garland, Jarrett Allen, Max Strus, and something like that for Kevin Durant. Do the Cavs do that? Does that make sense?
Hmm. And Allen,
I think the two pieces were like
I don't think they
Garland
do
and,
it, but
and Jarrett Allen, and then like maybe Max Strus was in there as well.
I do think Allen's the most likely to be moved out of all those guys. I think Darius Garland's thumb injury, I think, bought the Cavs 5 months of time to not trade him, but I think Allen is a name that I think could be gone. You know, I really do. I mean, he's a very traditional center, and like we've talked about, that's not really helpful, as much. You need somebody who can stretch the floor, and Evan Mobley shot 37% from deep. I think that's your center, and you got to go find somebody else to play the four who can sort of complement him. I don't know if the Cavs would do that for Durant, but it would be really interesting. I mean, it'd be really interesting. The
I
Cavs are in
I would say
flux.
Donovan Mitchell, Kevin Durant, and Evan Mobley would be
I mean,
that'd be
incredible.
pretty electric.
It'd be awesome. I don't know if they would do. I don't know if they have the guts to do something big like that. Like, I'm thinking like somebody threw out Jared Allen for Austin Reeves and um Dalton Connect. Like that's sort of what I'm thinking that they're going to get offers for. And I don't know if I really like that. I've also seen like Garland for Trey Murphy and with the rookie center, I don't know how to pronounce his name. You've Misi. I
Eve
don't know.
Misi.
Eve Misi. I've
Great.
Yeah.
seen
Trey
that
Murphy
too.
would be a
I,
guy.
I wanted to let you work your way through it for a couple more seconds.
Well, it was a month off. Give me a break. It must have been bad for a long time.
Can the Pistons get in on Trey Murphy? I think he would be an awesome
that
grab.
would be nice.
He'll cost you more than KD will.
Honestly,
I believe so.
probably.
Yes.
No,
I
no,
believe
no
so.
question. He will cost you more than KD
Yeah.
will. So again, and I think that's kind of what the Pistons have to bring into this offseason is just like understanding like, okay, one, do we take a big swing, yes or no? If the answer is yes, how much are we willing to give up? And like what are we trying to target? Is it a Trey Murphy, like a younger guy who's more in the mold of like this age group of the core? Or is it somebody who's a vet and maybe isn't going to be around here for 5 more years, but could be the guy that like takes you into that true title contention either this year or the next. So yeah, they've got some big decisions to make here. Like
They do.
it's big philosophical choices.
I have just a couple other because I like playing the point guard game. I have a couple other point guard game names. We're just gonna call this the name game. Um, for backup point guards. Would you rather have Ty Jerome at 14 million a year or Dennis Schroeder?
I mean, after the season he had, I'd have to say Ty Jerome.
Yeah, but about after the playoffs he had.
Uh,
He shot one for 14 in game two against Indiana. If he had one more basket, the Cavs win.
yeah, that's hard.
That's a lot of money for a guy who's never done this before. I think that's the internal issue that the Cavs are having is like, what are we going to do? I mean, we could pay Tyus Jones a fraction of it and get, 70% of the production.
14 mil's a lot, yes, but the cap is going up. Like
It
the
is.
cap's going up, and 14 million is frankly going to be a decent price for a high level backup point guard. So yeah, I'd say yeah, yes, I would do it. I'd rather have Ty Jerome
The
and
other,
just have the better player because again, I think it's a similar thing. Like you can play him with Ivy, you can play him with Cade, you can play him without either
yeah,
one. Like I think it works either way, and he provides you with a real scoring threat. So which is something they really needed off the bench this year. Like
right.
they depended on Malik Beasley. We saw it in the playoffs. Like Malik Beasley had a very poor playoffs, and they didn't really have any other answers on the
No.
bench. You can like look at the series, the on-off stuff. It's like, oh, they pretty much won all the lineup minutes except for the ones with Malik Beasley on the floor, and they couldn't pivot to anything else. So yeah,
Can we go back to Trey Murphy for a second?
Yeah.
How far off is Jalen Duren, Ron Holland, Marcus Sasser, a 2026 first and a 2028 first for Trey Murphy?
I think that gets it done.
Would you do that? Because I would.
I would do that. Yeah.
I would do
I
that.
just, I have no idea what the Pelicans are going to do with
Oh
Dumars
God.
now and with Zion Williamson in wherever he is right now with the legal situation. I don't know if the Pelicans are even going to be like, I don't know what their plan is at all. If that makes Trey Murphy harder to trade because they're like, we need somebody, or if they're
Give my
like,
sales
start
pitch.
over.
Let me give you
For
the sales pitch for the Pelicans' sake. Trey Murphy's already 24. You're you
Ancient.
you have well, you have to blow this thing up when it comes to guys like DeJounte Murray, CJ McCollum. You probably should trade Zion as well, although his value is probably it feels like every time Zion's trade value maybe like creeps back up a little, something happens to shoot it right back down.
Yeah.
I mean, like if I'm the Pelicans, I strip this thing bare. I get any asset I can get for everyone on my roster because I'm not near competing right now. So I get Ron Holland and Jalen Duren. They're both what, 21? Maybe one of them's 20. So I get
I think Ron's 20, Duran's 21.
yeah. So I get a 20 and 21-year-old. I get Marcus Sasser, who's just kind of a throw-in really for the cap, but he's still kind of young. I guess it gives them someone to take up some minutes. I
Wonderful
get
tanking commander. Marcus Sasser.
There
I
you
mean,
go.
just would be
There
awesome.
you go. So you get two young prospects that both have played real NBA minutes, and I also get two first round picks for Trey Murphy. If I'm tearing this thing down, and I've still got to make moves to go, get off McCollum and get off Murray. I don't know, man. I think it kind of makes sense for both teams. I really think it does.
I think at
Think
that
about
price
Cade
point,
Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Asar Thompson, Trey Murphy, and then I guess it's Isaiah Stewart slash center you get on in the open market. I don't know, man. That's really interesting to me.
in a vacuum, I'd prefer Trey Murphy. But I think if we're throwing out the respective trade packages, I'd almost prefer Durant, I think, in that case. Just
That's
because I think it gives you more
You're
flexibility
right
moving
that it's going to
forward.
cost less.
Trey Murphy, I love Trey Murphy, but is he an all NBA level player, or is he just like a
He's
maybe two, two,
Not
three-time
right now.
all-star
He's
type
not.
player? I'm saying, is he like a two, three-time all-star type player?
but
Like,
but
like
why
okay,
Trey
it's
Murphy
like
costs
it's
more is
like
because you're going to get you're talking about he's under contract for 3 4 years with another contract at what he's going to be 28 29 years old. You're still going to get another 3 4 good years out of him. There's the price difference. I don't know, man. For me,
I,
if I'm Detroit, I'm doing that. If I'm the Pelicans and I'm tearing this down, I'm doing that too.
I get where you're coming from, Aaron, but also it's just like, I don't know, he's had injuries. Like he's only played 50, he hasn't played 60 games the last 2 years. Like, I don't know. I'm just being a little too much like devil's advocate right here because I love Trey Murphy. So, but yeah, I definitely that would be a trade package I'd be comfortable with that for sure.
I think you need to have the Pelicans call you and ask for that because if it comes out that Trey Murphy's available, I think you'll have 20 teams
You will, yeah.
calling and offering their
There's
best
the thing.
package.
You need the Nico Harrison direct line. You need you know what I mean?
I
Straight
mean,
to hell.
Trajan's from New Orleans. He's got to pull those strings. But that's the thing in any trade for Detroit. There are teams that just like the
Have
Rockets
more.
have the picks
Yeah.
and the young pieces to put together a better package.
Yeah.
Okay, there are teams that just they can, and so that's why if you run it back, if you're Detroit, it's not the end of the world.
Not
Let's
the
be
end of the
honest,
world.
like
No, no.
there's other teams too. Like the Bucks have a better package. Like they have Giannis. The Bucks can trade for anybody. The Knicks have a better trade package. Like I'm just saying, like there's definitely teams with better trade packages out there. So it'll be interesting. I think honestly for Detroit, what's going to end up happening is they're going to have to wait for other dominoes to fall in the trade market first.
I think so.
They're going to have to wait, I think, for a couple teams to blow their powder keg. And yeah, Mike, wipe that grin off your face. Come on now,
It was
dude.
a quick pivot.
No, come on now. What was I saying again?
What I say?
Oh yeah, they're gonna have to wait for
We
people.
would end it with
No,
a bang. I
They're-
didn't necessarily think I meant literally, but here we are.
no, they're gonna have to wait for some other teams to like do their thing first, and then I think find who's still available and work within that. That's probably what I see is happening. It's either going to be that, it's going to be a small trade or two, and maybe an off-season signing. But it'll be really, really interesting to see what direction they go in because we've seen some really good things from Trajan Langdon last year, but this is his first off-season that to me is really the one where it's like, okay, like you've made this roster competent. It would have been hard to have been worse than the guy before you. What are you going to do when there's actually pieces there? How do you move this team forward and what's your philosophy and what do you look like as a trading partner? So there's a lot of things that are going to go into this offseason. We're going to learn a lot about this team and Trajan Langdon and the direction they want to go in.
Yep. That was a good conversation. That was a long podcast. That was a good, solid conversation. And we should add like the caveat that the NBA is ever since Luka Doncic trade, I'm done really predicting what's going to happen next. So
Nobody knows anything anymore.
no one knows anything. So everything that we said, could be moot. The Pistons could trade for Durant tomorrow or whatever, and we'll be like, well, yeah, of course, it's the NBA. So But this was good stuff, guys. Any last closing thoughts before we round out this podcast?
No, I mean, look, the NBA draft is 2 weeks away. It's on June 25th. Next week, I'm sure will be more of a deep dive into the draft, although Detroit doesn't have a first round pick
Guess who's not picking
as of
fifth?
right now. Yeah, right. For the first time in 3 years.
Right.
Crazy. But
Yeah.
good show, guys. I'm glad to be back. This was a lot of fun.
This was a lot of fun. Yes. Good to be
Same
back.
here. I can't wait to see how the rest of this finals plays out, and can't wait to get back into it with you guys next week as well.
Next week, yes. Can't wait. But we do have some NBA finals, to round us out. The NBA season's not totally over. It just kind of feels like weirdly over already, which is maybe a testament to who's playing in it. But we still have some games left, so we definitely are going to be tuning in to that as well. Well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Palace Pistons podcast, part of the Believe Network. I'd like to thank my two co-hosts, Aaron Johnson and Jasper Apollonia, for letting me back on the pod after 2 months off of not being on it. It was good to be back, fellas, and we'll be back next week, and we'll see you all next time.